Thank you, Frank. First of all, let me introduce my friend Victoria Drake, who will play harp for me, for you, a bit later in the talk. The title of my talk today is Habitats for Music and the Sound of Math. Before I get into what I mean by habitats for music or the sound of math, I'd like to introduce you to a few members of my family. These are my two grandpas. They both came to America during the early decades of the 20th century. The Norwegian one on the right and the Japanese one on the left, yes. Well, they came for the same reason most people came to America at that time and still come to America, and that is in search of simply prosperity. My Norwegian grandfather was economically destroyed by the Great Depression. My Japanese grandfather was economically ruined by his years of internment during the Second World War. Those are my parents about a year before I was born. Beautiful, young, struggling music students living here in New York. And that's my mom, and yeah, that's me. Yeah, no one could actually believe she was my mother, apparently. Especially when I got to be about 5 and I weighed more than she did. Yeah, well, she seemed to know what almost all Asian moms, for some reason, seem to know, and that is that music of all known disciplines is just the most fun and enjoyable thing for a small child to learn. This was about a year before she started teaching me how to play the piano. Yeah, and this was home for the first 8 years of my life. When my father was working his way through school, at this point he was working. He was studying at Columbia University for his doctorate in music education, and driving a taxi all night to support his family, who lived just down the road, actually up the road in Harlem. That's a housing project called Grant Housing. It's on 125th Street. That's where we lived until I was 8 years old. It's a very scary place. When I was 6, the nice old milkman was murdered a few paces from our apartment door by a gang of 12-year-olds. And yes, yours truly again. But yeah, looking no worse for wear. That's just a couple of months after the horrific event. But seriously, that goofy outfit is really something. The girl's bike and the birdwatcher binoculars, and he plays the violin too. I mean, that kid was, you'd think he'd be beat up at school every single day. But actually it didn't happen, and I think one reason it didn't happen was because of something my parents created within the confines of our cramped apartment there in the projects. Something I call a habitat for music, where music, like some kind of potent medicinal plant, was cultivated and tended and harvested, and we ingested and absorbed, lived, breathed. For me, that habitat for music and my experience with music in that way, not only it was the direct result of my prosperity, but actually my survival and my life itself. That's my father. My father, after graduating with a music ed degree, doctoral degree from Columbia, eventually got his dream job, which was to teach music in New York City. And in this case, the South Bronx, which was at the time an incredibly dangerous place. Those children were among the luckiest people to ever live in the South Bronx. My father taught music at that junior high school for nearly 30 years. And he himself was a product of the New Jersey public school music programs. Sadly, within 2 years of his retirement, that school's music program was entirely shut down, along with thousands of others across this country. And thousands continue to be shut down, not to be reopened, mostly because people think that music is not as important for children to study in school as math or science. That's Bach, J.S. Bach. For me, he's the venerable grandpa of all Western music. Every kind of music can be traced back to this man. He is certainly the most influential of all composers, precisely because his is the only music that every single composer since Bach for the last 200 years, 250 years, studied when he himself was in school, music school. He's the only composer whose music that every music student on earth studies at music school, conservatory, and university. And I ask why? What makes Bach different? I'm not sure it's what makes Bach different, but what does he exemplify? And to me, that can only be referred to with words like math. I think he exemplifies what I call the sound of math, in other words, music, more than any other musician. And I believe that every kind of music has some kind of essence, some hidden, powerful essence. It may be, in fact, the active ingredient in that medicinal plant I referred to earlier. But whatever it is, it's probably the reason that music, and only music of all known disciplines, has the power to transform the very physiology of the developing brain in a child. Only music. So this is the kind of analysis we all do in music school. It's nothing interesting. But this one is actually interesting. This is done by my colleague at Indiana University, a mathematician, musician, Jay Hook. It's an analysis of a piece of music from a purely mathematical perspective. He's in the process of writing a major book on musical analysis from a mathematical perspective. And here's another pretty famous mathematician, musician, Pythagoras. So this is not new. This is not a new connection, the music-math connection. It was lost for hundreds of years, but in those days, obviously, music and math were considered siblings. In any case, the problem for me these days is that we've got to catch up with the new science. We've got to catch up with what we now know due to brain imaging technology and all the studies within the last 5 years which have come to some extraordinary conclusions. First of all, that music, well, we can now say that music isn't just as important as math or science or history, reading, etc. But in fact, we have to admit that it is much more important because it is the only subject which actually improves performance in all of the others. So then we're talking about something really important, not just important from an educational point of view, but from a national point of view. We also know that music, 2 years of music instruction for a child will protect that child for his entire life against a multitude of disabling symptoms associated with aging. 2 years of music instruction as a child simply sets the brain up to be able to resist all kinds of problems associated with aging. And we think maybe even that child will be more resistant to Alzheimer's because of 2 years of music instruction. And this at the time when public schools are cutting music programs all the time, you know, it's quite incredible. But yeah, I'd like to play a little music for you now. And Tori will join me. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Tori. So, yes, I'd like to address parents, teachers, school superintendents, politicians, Democrats, Republicans, independents. I think we can agree on something here. You know, maybe, I really hope we can agree on something here. This is really about America, and it's you know, nonprofits and private teachers. We all do our bit, but this is really about America. This is we can make this a kind of Team America thing, you know. And I believe that it's not only about American education. It's not only about American health. We're talking about America's prosperity. We're talking about American competitiveness on the global in the global marketplace. We're talking about American leadership among nations, and most of all, we're talking about the quality of America's performance on the global playing field. So I hope you're with me when I say that for the sake of our prosperity, for the sake of our health, for the sake of sheer joy, we must teach the children to play. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's my son, by the way. That's my son. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.